The one that was probably the scariest for me this was a while ago. This was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. But an individual had been hit for a PAGA claim, and it was also a wage and hour class action, which oftentimes goes hand in hand, not always. But in order to address the issue, the business, it was an agricultural business. It ultimately had to file for bankruptcy. And so it went into bankruptcy. But the PAGA penalty and some of the wage and hour claims still stuck to the individual owner, because an owner can be individually liable for both PAGA and wage and hour claims. And he was faced with the idea that he needed to file for bankruptcy in order to get out from underneath this thing. So he filed for personal bankruptcy, and, it was utterly devastating, and it was, hard to go through with him at every step of the way. And then come to find out that the PAGA lawsuit, or the PAGA liability, remained. It survived bankruptcy because it was the way that the court reasoned was that it was essentially a law enforcement action, and the individual was standing in the place of the government, so that it was a non-dischargeable debt. And so to deal with all that, to go through company bankruptcy and personal bankruptcy, and then find out that you still are not, you haven't shaken this PAGA, that still to date is, very much stuck with me, as you might imagine.
Welcome to the California Labor Law Odyssey. My name is Tom Manzo, and I'm the president of the California Business and Industrial Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization that was formed to bring awareness to the widespread abuse of the Private Attorneys General Act, better known as PAGA. PAGA was signed into law by Governor Gray Davis back in 2004, and since has been used to extract hundreds of millions of dollars from California's businesses under the virtuous banner of employee advocacy. What people don't realize is that those millions of dollars never went to the employees. It went to the shark lawyers and to the state of California. These sharks aren't recovering lost wages. They're looking for small mistakes they can build up into a class action lawsuit. You see, attorneys' fees are protected under the Private Attorneys General Act, so they can charge whatever they want, but they only get paid if there's a settlement. Their end game is always a big settlement, never a trial. This is not justice, and we're here to expose it. Our guest today is Stephen Crass from Wanger, Jones, and Hensley. And he is one of the good guys, an attorney that fights for business owners every day. So welcome to the show, Stephen. Thanks for coming on.
Well, I really appreciate it. And what a great introduction to be called a good guy. So thank you.
You should have a white hat on.
Well, I'll grab one. Yes. No, a lot of times as attorneys, we're not always called good guys. So I appreciate it anytime we are.
Well, it's hard. I mean, you're in a tough role. You're in a tough position. Tell us about your law firm.
Yeah, so we're a law firm in Fresno, California. We primarily do, I would say, we're litigators and primarily business litigation. Judge Wanger, the individual with the first part of that name, he was a retired federal judge for 20 years, and so he's seen it all, and happy to be associated both with Judge Wanger and Tim Jones and Michael Helsley. Those guys are great leaders, and I'm in a firm with a bunch of great litigators.
So how long have you been practicing employment law?
Yeah, so I've been practicing law for 20 years. I passed the bar in 2000. I've been practicing employment law almost exclusively probably for the last 12 of those years.
12 of those years. So how did you start out? Tell us about Stephen and your life a little bit.
Yeah, well, I started out in the law as a deputy district attorney just for a minute or two. And the reason that it was only a minute or two was because I'd already signed up in law school to go to the JAG Corps. And so I was a Navy JAG. And so I left the district attorney's office when my orders came ready, and went and did that for about 6 years, and was able to do both defense work and prosecutor work. In the Navy, I did some administrative work, and I even deployed there in the middle of that of my time there. And then when I left the JAG Corps, I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Was a federal prosecutor there for about a year, and then from there, as my family was growing, it's Father's Day yesterday, but as my family was growing, it made more sense to me to go into civil practice, and I went to a firm that did employment law, and it just happened to be that there was a connection that I had at the U.S. Attorney's Office that was at Littler Mendelsohn, which is a big employment defense firm, and that's where I really started cutting my teeth with employment law.
Wow. So did you become a JAG before the TV show or after the TV show?
It was after the Tom Cruise Few Good movie, but before the show.
Was the show about you or no? No.
I wish the show was about me, but I always make the joke that, it's too bad that Days of Thunder didn't come out. Maybe I would have gone with the Tom Cruise race car driver instead of JAG attorney. But it was after, probably that was probably that the movie is probably what gave me the idea of JAG in the first instance.
Well, we appreciate your service. We should always thank all of our veterans and who committed their life and time to their country. So thank you very much for that. So now you're doing employment law, and that's quite a bit of a change. And what are some of the things that you like about employment law? What motivates you every day to come to work and work with companies and help them out? Well,
I think that employers do an amazing thing in California and throughout the country. They really are the lifeblood to our economy. I always feel like I'm on the right side, helping people wade through issues that they may have that may impact their business. I think through this pandemic, that we're having with COVID-19, we've just seen how important employers are to our daily lives. And the one thing that I will say that if any good thing has happened from the pandemic is the idea that we're at least now calling employers essential. And Tom, that's probably something you and I have known for a long time.
Right. Yeah. No, good point. So, as you've been practicing and you're dealing with your clients, so over the years, how many of these Private Attorney General Act cases have you dealt with, you think? Just ballpark as to estimate.
It probably, they come in so many different sizes and shapes, right? So from the demand letter that you get from some of our probably favorite law firms that I know that you at least keep track of these things on your webpage, right. Some of the frequent flyers, but from the idea that we just get a demand letter to actually a case being filed, and if I took all of those things plus advice, at least scores of times, maybe hundreds of times, really. Literally, I just got out of a meeting right before we got on this to talk to you with another employer that just received a PAGA notice. And so I was going through the process of that just right before. But it's a lot.
It's a big number. No matter what, it's a big number.
It is a big number, yes. Right. Yes.
Right. And what's really shameful, I think, right now is what we're seeing is the PAGA lawsuits are actually ramping up. I've noted that, since January of this year, they're going up, sometimes almost tenfold on a percentage basis. How do you persuade or talk to a business owner and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm on your side? It almost is, sometimes I'm sure you have the feeling you're the messenger that's getting shot here. I mean, how do you deal with that on a daily basis?
I think that the big thing when you're talking to a client on any issue, but particularly with PAGA, is that you just need to be honest and let them know the process that they're facing and what they're up against. I think you need to talk to them about all of the warts. I think one of the big things, Tom, is that you can't overpromise as to what you can do. You and I both know the evils of these lawsuits and what they look like. And so to say that we're just going to, we're going to get you out of this scot-free and don't worry about it, you can throw that PAGA notice in the trash can, is just not a realistic expectation. And so that's really what I try to convey.
And you're absolutely right. If I think all the listeners out there, and if you're new and an attorney says, "Oh, don't worry, we can get you out of this, no problem," it's not that simple, and it's not that easy. And you have to make sure you're getting, good advice from somebody that really understands employment law.
Yeah, and I also think that there's a frustration level too, because people that might be in your association are actively looking for information, which I think is a really key component to staying on top of all of these things. They might come to an attorney and have them review their employee handbook, and they think that they've dotted every I and crossed every T. And even when those things happen and they do the best that they can still be hit with one of these lawsuits, and there still may be liability based on clever arguments. And so I think that's where some of the frustration comes with their own, with people's own counsel as well.
In your experience, tell me one of the worst stories, one of the worst situations that was a PAGA claim that you've had to deal with, that's something you think about and wish it could have changed or done differently or something.
Yeah, so I'll give you two, and I probably could give you 10, but I'll at least give you two. The one that just happened to me not too long ago was I went to a mediation, and the mediation brief's confidential, but in the demand, essentially, it was $50 million that they accumulated in PAGA. In PAGA penalties, and I went back through, and as far as their math was right, and so ultimately we were able to resolve that for significantly less than that. But obviously, when you're facing those kind of numbers, those kind of astronomical numbers, it just puts the employer around a barrel where they can be essentially, legally extorted for this money, because they realize that if they don't settle, that the potential liability can be so steep that they can't fight it, right? So that's one that just the sheer number was just so ridiculous that.
What kind of number did they end up settling for? What was the accepted number?
We ended up resolving that case for about $500,000.
$500,000.
But that's still a significant amount of money, obviously. So that's one that was certainly is stuck in my craw a little bit, and that just the sheer amount of the demand. The one that was probably the scariest for me was a while ago. This was probably 5 or 6 years ago now, but an individual had been hit for a PAGA claim, and it was also a wage and hour class action, which oftentimes goes hand in hand, not always. But in order to address the issue, the business, it was an agricultural business, it ultimately had to file for bankruptcy. And so it went into bankruptcy. But the PAGA penalty and some of the wage and hour claims still stuck to the individual owner, because an owner can be individually liable for both PAGA and wage and hour claims. And he was faced with the idea that he needed to file for bankruptcy in order to get out from underneath this thing. So he filed for personal bankruptcy, and it was utterly devastating, and it was hard to go through with him at every step of the way. And then come to find out that the PAGA lawsuit, or the PAGA liability, remained. It survived bankruptcy, because it was the way that the court reasoned was that it was essentially a law enforcement action, and the individual was standing in the place of the government, so that it was a non-dischargeable debt. And so to deal with all that, to go through company bankruptcy and personal bankruptcy, and then find out that you still are not, you haven't shaken this PAGA, that still to date is very much stuck with me, as you might imagine.
Yeah. I actually met somebody that happened to, and they were with a trucking company, and I believe he owned it for 41 years, believe it or not. And after 41 years, he got hit with a wage and hour, and it's kind of a family-run type deal, and they weren't keeping track of their drivers clocking in and out for lunch, so they had no way to prove it. So they lost, they had no money to pay this, and that's what they did, and it ended up forcing this person to file bankruptcy for his company and file bankruptcy personally. If you had some advice for employers, what would you tell them?
I think one of the biggest things is that you just really need to be to stay in tune with the employment laws. And I think in order to do that and the best practices, I think it's staying in contact with organizations like yourself. That you do that might push information out there that regarding new changes in the law. I think maintaining obviously contact with your employment attorney is always good, but like your local chamber of commerce is also a good resource. California Chamber of Commerce pushes good information out. So I think maintaining that kind of situational awareness allows you to be able to best adapt and to change your rules, and so that if you do know that there's a problem with a temperature in your bathroom or monitoring a walkie-talkie during your break period or some other law change that has recently happened or a new focus, that you're well prepared for it. You've already made that change. So I think really that's my biggest advice to employers is just make sure that you don't completely put this aside and that you do stay in contact with organizations and attorneys that are putting out good educational information. Yeah,
and that's tough. What would you say to a legislator?
Yeah, I think there would be two things that I would like to tell him. The first one that I would tell him is I'd probably tell him that same story that you just told about the trucking guy that was there for 41 years. But I think putting those faces and names and backstories to people that have been hurt by wage and hour class actions and PAGA auctions really would be, I think first and foremost, because I think too many times it's lost in this kind of corporation or business, and it has a name behind it, and you don't realize that this is somebody's baby, that they've started from the grass, from the very beginnings, and built this thing up, and it's blood, sweat, and tears, or it's a family business that they've had for generations that has been passed down, and it's, they very much care about their businesses and about what this could potentially impact. And kind of along those lines is how much they do care. Everybody that I've ever talked to, Tom, they really do care for their employees and they want to do the best thing for them. And I know that was kind of a 1A and 1B. My second thing that I would like, I could probably give them 5 or 6, but the second thing is just how one violation can spiral out of control into to be, from just a mealtime violation where you have to pay somebody their 1 hour of penalty. And if, for a $15 employee, you should have to pay $15, right? That's the penalty. That's what's assessed in the labor code. And that's the intention, I think, behind that labor code provision. But when you add all these PAGA penalties and these other, wage statement violations and waiting time penalties and, wage order violations, that single kind of $15 mistake that the person didn't get their meal period is now, a several $100 problem for each employee that employer has. And so, a minor problem can turn in from a very, small thing to millions of dollars. And to me, that's just inherently unfair.
Yeah, we cited in our case that an employee was shorted a total of $22 over a period of 1 year. And, that shortage could be anything. Maybe it's an error, a payroll error, a time clock issue, the de minimis time, that was, you short paid them by a minute because they're 2 minutes a day because that's how long it took them to lock up and shut the store and close it for the night. On that $22 over a period of 1 year, it equals $67,500 worth of penalties and violations. And when you have 30 or 40 employees times $67,500, that's a very, very big number. Very big number.
It just doesn't seem like the penalty matches the, and maybe this is a bad term, but, it doesn't match the crime or the violation, right? That very small and minor can just be that destructive and can be the difference really between a company surviving and not surviving. And that doesn't seem fair.
Absolutely. And, we have a lot of members in Fresno. I've been in the Fresno area. It's a great area, very diverse, a lot of manufacturing and, a lot of good, hard-working people. And, that's that way all around California. And I think the biggest problem is I think a lot of people think, well, it's like a big Walmart. You know, a lot of these business owners, oh, they've got money and they can afford it and they can do this. And it's really not the case. You know, I mean, all the people that you've met, you know, how many business owners do you think were trying to circumvent the system or cheat their employee? Was there any?
I can't say that I'm aware of any, Tom. I mean, really, particularly when it comes to the wage and hour, PAGA type violations that you have, CLLO, I think the same thing goes. Everybody wants to take care of their employees. Everybody, you know, and I think they all pride themselves on being very fair employers and being generous employees. And I can tell you, I think that's a great point that you say that, you know, everybody thinks that there's this Walmart. And I can tell you that, you know, employers come in every size. They come in every you know, race that we have in California. There's minority-owned businesses, you know, throughout California that I deal with. That they're all very passionate and they want to do what's best. You know, both for the economy and for all their employees.
Well, Stephen, you know, we love having you on the show, and hopefully we can have you on the show again. As one of our guests, we do have a gift for you, a special gift. And California Business and Industrial Alliance hands out medals to business owners and people like yourself that help us out, you know, because we need you. You're appreciated.
Well, I really do appreciate that. That's going to be awesome. You know, we joked earlier about the TV show of Jag. I have a little shadow box in my office that medal will hang proudly beside.
Wow.
No, I do appreciate that, but I will say in all seriousness too that the employers are important to me. I really do appreciate them, and because of that, I appreciate organizations like yourself who are looking out for them. So, you know, thank you very much, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to be on.